Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Count Out. This week we're talking AEW. So, some positive signs for the company. This past week's episode of Dynamite hit over 1 million viewers, the highest watched episode of 2023, but that's kind of the outlier. We want AEW to be a healthy, happy company, hiring wrestlers in perpetuity. And so, given
them
that
good money too.
Yeah. And so given that they have had some woes as of recently with their creative and whatnot, we thought we'd come around, being a couple of old wizened minds. We want to be AEW's brain trust and help them.
Be the brain trust, yes.
And help them weather these hard times by giving them 10 ways that they could be fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Start number 10. Anything
to add to the intro?
No, that was good.
That was a good intro, right?
That was fine. I got nothing to add. I'm chomping at the bit to get into this. I'm bursting with ideas practically.
You're chomping at the bit to get back to your Fritos.
There's only a little bit left.
Oh, you got a little kid's bowl. That's great.
I know. I have to control my serving size when I have Fritos. Otherwise, I eat the whole bag. So I have to get the kid's bowl, put a little bit in there to control myself.
Hey, the bag is the serving size. That's what that's the credo I live by.
The allure of Fritos.
Yeah, so am I. That's why I don't.
Number 11 on this list. Number 11 on this list. Fritos.
Yeah, there you go. That'll fix everything. Let's move on to number 10 then.
10.
Elevate new talent to the main event. So, Larson, you wrote this one down.
Yeah.
What's on your mind? What's going on here?
You know, you look at AEW's track record of elevating talent to the main event. People who weren't prior main eventers elsewhere. I think right now in the men's division, you got two examples that are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. You got Ricky Starks, who is obvious, that they're trying to elevate to the next level. He's been in a protracted feud with Chris Jericho which has a story that's pretty much been told in reverse. But you can tell the intention is there to get Ricky Starks to the main event level or upper mid card. Opposite of that, you have someone like Wardlow, who they're really trying to get up to the main event. I mean, his circumstances unfortunately kind of derailed his push, with the MJF stuff around Double or Nothing, that match, which really should have been a huge moment for Wardlow, ended up kind of not being because it was so cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And after that, they completely dropped the ball.
Yeah.
In terms of reestablishing any sort of momentum for Wardlow. So it's not the best track record. I mean, MJF is probably the greatest success story they've had in terms of bringing somebody in who wasn't really necessarily well known to maybe a good portion of their fan base and elevating him to the main event. In the women's division, you got Jade Cargill, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And then the Acclaimed in the tag division.
In the tag division. But as you know, like Ricky, they're doing an all right job with, because I think the fan base really, really likes him.
Yeah, right.
But from a creative standpoint, he's pretty much transcended kind of creative to get himself to this point. Mm-hmm. Because really, him beating Jericho should be the culmination of this story and feud, not the start of it.
Yeah.
And so it's really his skills, his talent, his charisma that's helped him rise above kind of so creative. Whereas Wardlow, I mean, it's almost a year after Double or Nothing last year. And, the promo he had last week talking about his dad and making the story with Joe much more personal. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's going to help him get from a creative standpoint, from a character standpoint, back on track. But you think about a lot of talent on the roster now that is there and is ready to be elevated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And I know both Swerve and Keith Lee were in WWE at one point. And Keith Lee was double champion in NXT, but at least in terms of success on the main roster, I mean, in Swerve's case, he wasn't even there long enough to really get any sort of major success on main roster WWE. But those are two guys that they should be pushing now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a number of people, and we're going to talk about this in a later entry, and it all has to do with follow-up, and it has to do with follow-up. Wardlow's a great example, and I hope that this, match with Samoa Joe really does a lot. You can get a lot accomplished in one match. You really can.
Yeah, you can.
you can establish a moment that is memorable and carries you to new momentum, and that's what Wardlow needs right now. Wardlow is a lot further behind than he should have been, given that it's been 9 months since Double or Nothing, over 9 months now since Double or Nothing, and yeah, he's challenging for the TNT title, but clearly, he was a guy who everybody saw while he was with the Pinnacle as a guy who could easily break free from the Pinnacle and ascend immediately to the main event scene. And that didn't happen. It was because of drop ball creative. You look at a guy like Hobbs as well, and a guy like Hobbs has everything it takes. They build him up with these really great vignettes, the Book of Hobbs stuff. And then he hasn't been on cable TV, I believe, in a month, and it was in a squash match back in January, about a month ago. He's been on Dark and Elevation since then. I hope we see him maybe at Revolution. Maybe if Wardlow beats Samoa Joe, then Hobbs can come out and wreck Wardlow, and they can get into a protracted thing, which we'll see Wardlow get his first singles title. But yeah, they have a lot of talent. It's funny because the first couple of years they easily were able to skate by on former WWE plus guys who had already been established outside of WWE but were established coming in, the Elite, and other bigger names that were coming in. But they also had a really terrific crop of younger talent, some of which have been able to elevate, but kind of not enough, like the acclaimed Jade and MJF. And MJF really did sort of hit the ground running. Like
definitely.
Even in terms of like in his indie status, like he was ready to break through.
Oh yeah.
And he's an absolutely terrific talent. But yeah, they need to really focus on a guy like Starks, for example, and make sure that he's not put in a position where he has to break through bad creative, use good creative to propel him to that next level, so that you have a steady stream. Because right now we kind of expect, after MJF, it's probably going to be another established name. And then maybe we can get another, fresh name for the world title scene.
You look at, the names that are in, contending for the AEW title. And you got Danielson. A year ago, he was feuding with Hangman for the title. You got Mox. You got to toss Jericho's name in there. Page, and then Adam Cole.
Yeah.
And I know Adam Cole hasn't wrestled several months, but still, and a year ago, you probably would have named the same exact 5 people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's why I'm saying the next guy I think is going to be an established guy.
Yeah, but you need to start doing that work now in terms of establishing new contenders to the world title.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that once MJF drops it, if there is somebody established to pick it up, then that person has somebody ready, either a bad guy or a good guy or whatever the sequence is going to be, depending on how they handle that. But yeah, you need fresh talent. You need to build them up, not build them up so they go to WWE and become even bigger stars. You need to build them up, make them stars in AEW.
Yep.
Number 9.
9. Sorry, fell asleep here.
Figure out the vision for. You're on a Friendo coma right now.
Really am. I'm just right there. I'm just looking at him.
Let's do this fresh. Number 9.
9.
Figure out your vision for Rampage. So this past week's Rampage ratings reached a new low, 297,000 total viewership. 287,000 total viewership. And yes, there is a caveat there. It was on at arguably a better time slot, but it was at a different time slot than usual.
Yeah.
And it was the lead into the All-Star stuff, which arguably should have helped as well, but it didn't. Rampage tip-off ended up doing the worst numbers for Rampage, and Rampage has very quickly gotten the reputation for being, a late era WCW Thunder, where just nothing happens and nothing of importance. You don't have to tune in to see it. When Rampage first started, it very much felt like it was supposed to be, and it was positioning itself to be essentially a third hour of essential AEW programming, a third hour of Dynamite, where stories will be told. The problem is when there aren't a lot of stories already being told of consequence on Rampage, on Dynamite, then an hour of Rampage ain't going to accomplish that either. So you need to figure out, what Rampage is going to be. Is it going to be a Dynamite overrun? Is it going to be its own universe, in which case those characters need to sort of stay on Rampage? I mean, there's a number of issues. Number one, the time slot obviously is terrible.
Terrible.
You have a whole network of channels that you could probably choose from. I don't think it needs to be on TNT if that's going to be an issue. If there's no other place for it on TNT because of how heavily invested they are with things like basketball, then you just got to find another network for it in a better time on Thursday.
Yeah, I know. Or they can't bump 1 hour of Big Bang Theory.
Those probably do very well.
I know. When there's no, yeah, I know they probably do very well. Yeah. As for the vision of Rampage, as you mentioned, is it going to be story focused 3rd hour Dynamite? Is it just going to be, okay, well, we're not going to invest the time in telling stories here, so let's put on good matches? Is it going to be the show for like up and coming talent? Like, what is it going to be? Decide what it is. And then once you make that decision, follow through on it and invest the resources necessary to see that vision through for whatever the show is going to be. Like for all the faults that AEW has, generally the one thing you can't quibble with is the quality of the wrestling on the show. It's usually fantastic. Problem is you can't rely solely on really good wrestling to draw viewers in, because they won't be invested in the outcome of the matches. That's why you need the stories leading into and involved in the matches. And there's been so many times where they'll announce the card for Rampage, especially because probably it's an hour. And it's like, wow, that sounds like it'd be a really good match. And you're sitting there watching the match and you wonder, why don't I really care?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Like, I can't quibble on anything from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
But I'm not invested like I should be, because a lot of times, historically speaking, there wasn't a story behind it.
You know, one thing that I appreciated about Thunder and SmackDown back when it was basically when WWE is one brand, and when Thunder was actually like, you wanted to see Thunder because stuff happened on Thunder. It was Nitro would end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I want to know what is going to happen.
Yeah.
Nitro was always good, usually good with the cliffhangers. It's like, oh man, Sting just showed up, Robin Hood's next, and then what the hell happened? And then on Thunder,
Patrick Bergen shows up on your screen. You're like, no, I want to see Sting.
I want to see Sting again, please. Maybe against Patrick Bergen. But no, Thunder was good at, okay, this big thing happened. Now let's see what the fallout is. And I feel like, there were a couple times, I think WWE did like a cliffhanger episode not that long ago. It was like during PC era or something like that. I forget when it was, but they did like a cliffhanger episode. I was like, holy crap, that was kind of cool. And they like never did it again. Yeah. And I feel like for all the homage to WCW and Thunder that we get, Tony Khan admittedly has said he is a fan of Nitro and WCW back in the day. One thing that they did that AEW could totally do is the cliffhanger, because you have 2 nights later, you got Rampage, and it's like, what's going to happen here?
Yeah, especially because it's shot right after. You can literally pick up.
You could actually pick up where it left off. Yeah. Or, I mean, if you're on Thursdays, if you could, look, one thing that AEW should probably try to negotiate in their contract is, priority and maybe live Rampages weekly, because that will make people tune in. If you don't know what's going to happen, too often spoilers are out there if you want them, and because it's not live, you kind of automatically get the feeling, nothing really big is going to happen. Like, when's the last time we're like, oh my god, did you see the Rampage spoilers? It doesn't really happen that often. It's like, oh, okay, let's see, Josh Woods lost a match, and it's like, okay, whatever. So figure out what Rampage is going to do. Ideally, give whatchamacallit, Dynamite some cliffhanger endings. That's what I want to see.
There you go. That lead naturally into Rampage.
Dude, I on my Twitch stream, and I was watching some NWA, and they just they rolled credits during a match. It was a Ric Flair match.
Any match. Yeah, it was Flair and...
It was the main event.
Garvin?
No, it was Flair and one of the Midnight Express guys, I think.
Oh.
Because Garvin was going to be in the pay-per-view. It was like Ricky Morton, I think. Yeah, I think it was Ricky Morton.
Gotcha.
Anyways, let's move on. Number 8. Up the intensity and give every story and every match stakes. Now, the reason why we point this one out is because on Tuesday, looking at the Wednesday Dynamite card from this past week, we noticed that this seems like a 2-hour-long Rampage with matches that really didn't bring much intensity in terms of just on paper. However, when we watched the actual Dynamite, it was like, wow, a bunch of Rampage matches can kind of kick ass because they brought the intensity to the episode. It was paced with the sense of urgency. Every match did seem to matter in some way, shape, or form, and it made for an enjoyable Dynamite. And on top of that, the proof is in the pudding. Ratings were pretty good on the episode.
Totally. You know, and it's easy to say, okay, this match is for a title, therefore it has stakes. But then you get to the story of, well, I'm better. No, I'm better. I'm going to prove to you I can be champion. No, you can't. It needs to be more. It needs to be more. It needs to be personal. You need to be invested in who wins and who loses. And sometimes the personal can coalesce with the title pursuits, or I'm better, no, you're not. And that all can work. But just, I mean, we're looking at the Jericho Starks feud. That's pretty much, you're not at my level. Yes, I am. Mm-hmm. And you got Jericho, who is a wildly creative individual.
Yeah, right.
Shown it several times throughout his career. He's a great talker. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the type that'll go home and write TV.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, he just seems like he's got a wealth of ideas.
I feel like that dude just shows up and is like, what if we do this? Like, he's a very creative guy.
Yeah. And you got Starks. You look at the short films he does, I'm guessing he's pretty darn creative too.
Yeah, right.
He's a great talker. He's got tons of charisma. And yet, what was decided on, you're not on my level. Yes, I am. There should be so much more here. And especially now that Starks already beat Jericho in the first match, it doesn't really feel like there's stakes here.
Yeah, right.
Starks has got his win. What more does he have to prove?
He accomplished what he needed to accomplish. Yeah. You know, it's interesting you talk about that. Going back to your earlier point about stakes and titles and the personal, I thought a great example of that was Wheeler Yuta versus Orange Cassidy, which typically feels like should be a Rampage match because Orange Cassidy has held down Rampage in the main event for so long with the All-Atlantic title. However, because of their history and because of the way they told the story in that match, it felt like so much more than an All-Atlantic title defense, which usually you just sort of go into it knowing, okay, well, Orange Cassidy's going to do his shtick, and then they do the finish, and then everybody's, happy because they got to see the Orange Cassidy stuff. But this felt like so much more. It felt like it was about more than the title because they made it that because of their history. They referenced it multiple times during the match. Commentary referenced it. They brought it up, in picture-in-picture. It just felt like it was more. And every title defense across all divisions should have that amount of intrigue and interest in it, then the people will buy in. And that's honestly how you build stars. That match, I felt added a lot to what Wheeler Yuta is doing, has kind of been like whiny dude lately. But I like that there was this sort of, inner turmoil between his time in the Best Friends and now his time in Blackpool Combat Club that's spilling to the external. I thought it was really good. And if you could bring that to everything you do, then you've got a winner on your hands.
I mean, you look at what historically AEW has done well. You look at the Punk MJF feud. You look at the Elite Hangman story leading to Kenny and Hangman for the title. Every segment, whether it was a match, whether it was a backstage bit, every segment had a purpose and it mattered to the story being told. There was no filler. There was no match for the sake of having a match. Every segment was there for a reason, for a story beat that led to the conclusion of the story. You look at any wrestling story that works well. Hell, look at the Bloodline story now. Every segment matters.
Right.
And you're on the edge of your seat because of that. And it doesn't have to be, a huge ensemble thing like we see with the Bloodline. You just take two people, you take the personalities, you find something there that clashes, and you work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to number 7. Some people out there might not like this one, but stop using being the Elite for telling TV stories.
So apparently Hangman's been trying to break up with the Dark Order, do a friend breakup for weeks now. I had no idea.
I had no idea either. I heard the same thing. I think it was somebody in our chat that
mentioned that. So if we had gotten a hint of that on TV, the stuff over the last couple of weeks with Hangman and the Dark Order might have felt like it had more stakes. But because it kind of came out of nowhere, we're like, what? Why has Dark Order hasn't been on TV in months? Why are they helping Paige now? They haven't interacted at all in several weeks. But since those story beats were happening on the YouTube show, which unless, I hear something really funny happens, I just don't have the time to watch it usually.
Yeah, BT has not been the most compelling. Like, there was a span of time, like I watched obviously during as much of the Brody Lee era as I could, because that was the attraction. But even back then, other stuff just was like awkward and weird and not funny or not charming or anything. I watched when the Jacksons came back from their suspension because I was like, oh, okay, this is the first thing they're going to say. And then beyond that, it still had the same like awkward stuff that it's not compelling. It's like, okay, this is really cool for a vlog that people are really interested in this stuff and its silliness. But I understand the concept of, hey, let's plant some Easter eggs in being the elite. And then you see some of the jokes play out on TV.
Yeah.
But that's entirely different from being confused while you're watching TV because you're not paying attention to the silly vlog stuff.
If I remember correctly, there was times in kind of the early days of AEW where they were really relying on BTE to tell stories without recapping it on the show or anything like that. Yeah. And I remember kind of having this conversation back then, and then they kind of didn't do it so much, but it was just really glaring with the Dark Order stuff, especially where, that's kind of a major thing to exclude from the television broadcast if it's going to lead to a fairly significant story beat. With Paige and Mox in the Dark Order. You kind of need to clue people in on that because not everybody's watching BTE.
I always thought, and I know they're not going to do this because BTE is not exactly TV safe, and it's not produced to be that. It's produced to be a YouTube show. That's part of the charm. But clue us in. If you're going to do something that has been explored on BTE on TV, then at least give us some clips from BTE. Something. Or at least mirror it on TV when you do that.
Recreate those scenes
for broadcast
high-definition
quality.
Broadcast quality.
Yeah, exactly. Not
on
the
television.
Not the iPhone 4 that they use. Anyways, moving on. No. Number 6. Go back to that open world feel. One of the most appealing things of AEW, especially when it started, compared to WWE at the time, was everything felt like an organic single world, like characters would go all over the place and interact. And that was sort of where we got the joke about Cody Island, because that was the one outlier. It was, okay, everybody else seems to be interacting. Cody's on his own island and he's only taken on these certain people that we know he associates with anyways. But the rest of the show felt very open world. I thought things like, for example, Britt Baker's talk show, when they'd rope in other people and then she would get involved in the action. And that's where a couple different things had started and stopped. And so much of it felt like a big open world where everybody was interacting. And that's sort of calmed down over the past year.
I'll say this, during the Daily's Place era.
Yeah.
When they didn't have crowds, they had the locker room sitting ringside.
Yeah.
And you got to see, it wasn't like they were just sitting there, yay, cheering like we saw at on NXT in the PC era. Like you'd have MJF and Sean Spears gambling on matches. It was an opportunity for characters to show who they were.
Yeah, right.
By interacting with each other, by interacting with what was going on in the ring or along the ringside area during the matches. And that really did lead to that kind of open world feel, and that kind of permeated through the entire show, where things would happen backstage, things would cross over, feuds would intersect and then go their separate ways, and it just doesn't really seem to happen much anymore.
Yeah, dude, it's funny because I thought that AEW absolutely killed it during pandemic. Like, they did such a great job. And some of that, you'd see like various roster members, either they were ringside or sometimes they'd be sitting, in the actual seats there. And it's like, oh man, everybody has a target on them. Everybody is being viewed and seen, and so many different things can happen because you're throwing everybody in the same pot, and who knows what's going to happen. And at this point, it is very much like everybody's sort of segmented in their own feuds with each other. And it feels so much more alive and interesting and urgent when you get the feeling anything can happen, anybody can intersect with anybody. It makes it much more interesting. That's one thing that Triple H has really obviously endeavored to do since he's taken over, even if it's like the backstage sequences, which go from interview to segment to interview all in the same shot. And that's one thing that AEW used to do really, really well. And they actually kind of perfected, like you said, during the Daily's Place era. And they've really gone away from that. Let's move on to number 5. Elevate Jade Cargill to the main title scene. She's out of challengers at this point.
Yeah, I mean, she's 52 wins into her win streak. There's really no reason why she should be wrestling squash matches at this juncture still.
No.
And this kind of leads to, I mean, I don't know why they don't have stories for Jade Cargill. I don't get it. I mean, I understand, we'll get to it more later, that historically, AEW has not put the time and energy and resources into developing the women's division, dedicating time for matches, for developing stories, and for telling maybe more than one story at a time. But she's a champion. She's a huge star. She's got the potential to be a massive crossover star. Booking her and stories should be a priority.
Yeah, it should be.
And those stories should just naturally lead to her contending for the AEW Women's World Championship.
Yeah.
And it probably should have happened already.
You know, the smartest thing they could do, because I don't think she has anything going into Revolution right now.
No.
Unless they book something on the kickoff, last minute, which is probably what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Given that she's got nothing, I wonder if it's possible that, and I know this is probably wishful thinking, but what if Hayter comes out of this at the end and Jade comes out to confront her and holds up her title and they get like a title for title program? And here's the thing. You don't even have to pull the trigger on that immediately. If she confronts Jamie Hayter, you've got Saraya there. You've got Ruby Soho there, who's already got some history with Jade. You've got any number of other people who can sort of attack Jade out of some resentment for her thinking that she could be next. And then you sort of suck Jade up into the primary Dynamite women's division scene.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, where do you go? Literally, she has no opponents. And there are so many women featured in that main story in the women's division that I don't know. I don't know how they wouldn't do something like that.
Yeah, I know.
Because otherwise, okay. And this is probably more likely that she's just going to languish and they're going to bring in other people to fight her. But it's every name that could potentially be a challenger for her is on Dynamite in that outsider storyline right now.
Yeah. I mean, they could do the situation where say Ruby eventually aligns with Tony and Saraya for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so Jamie and Britt are looking for somebody else. Let's get Jade.
Yeah. And then you do a blood and guts or something, you
something
do
a
big match. Yeah.
Jade leads them to victory. And then she says, all right, I help you. Time for you to help me. I want a title shot.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think that now would be the perfect time to rope her up into that. I mean, dude, the story is right there. She is the biggest homegrown talent that AEW has outside of the Acclaimed. When even that's a debate to have. But yeah, it seems like it makes too much sense. Hopefully they pull the trigger on that because it makes all the sense in the world.
It really does. Really does.
Let's move on. Number 4. Stick to your plans. If you set something up, follow through with it until it has a conclusion. And then if you want to sit somebody, you sit them. But doing some stuff with Eddie Kingston, where he has a weird feud with Ortiz because Ortiz is jealous or something that the House of Black is attacking Eddie and not him. And then they make some reference to Eddie and then they have kind of a match. And then they do nothing else with Eddie Kingston is bizarre. And this is not the first time this has happened. There has been multiple instances, including House of Black, where they'll set stuff up. And I understand injuries happen and things, just visa issues happen. But man, you got to stop giving us a tease and then going half-ass with it and then completely dropping it without a proper resolution. This happens too much in AEW.
It really does. It really does. Or even instances where, for example, Miro seemed to be on a collision course with House of Black. There was even that 6-man tag match.
Yeah, right.
Was it All In last year? Where, Malachi was going to step away for a little bit and with them, the House of Black. And yes, I know Miro's aim was to battle the pagans, as he put it. But once Malachi took his break, you could have pivoted to Miro feuding with Darby because Darby was the one who pinned Malachi in that match. And Miro could have been I was going after him.
Yeah.
You took that opportunity from me. Now I'm going after you. And instead, we haven't seen Miro on TV since then.
Yeah.
And you know, if it's a situation where they're pitching him creative, which had been reported on, and he's not into it, that's one thing. But I mean, you have talent, exceptional talent, that you have on TV, feature for a bit, and then either circumstances change plans or there are no plans after a certain point, and then they're just gone.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense because you have such great talent. Find a way to rotate people through.
Yeah.
Efficiently.
Yeah.
So talent is being utilized rather than sitting at home.
Yeah, and the thing is, if they're gonna sit at home, there needs to be some communication, because then you get people like Miro. You have Lance Archer, for a while was Brian Cage, and they sort of bitch about that stuff, and that's why you have to communicate. You got to be better at that stuff. And yeah, in the case of Miro, when you made such a big deal about him, AEW makes such a big deal about him, it's just weird when he's gone. And it's I'm sorry, it's your job as a promoter to arrange for whatever you can come to. Yeah, nobody should be sitting at home because they don't want to do a job. And if they don't want to do a job or they want to protect themselves, fine. That happens in wrestling all the time. You find a workaround.
Yep.
You do, just like you did with MJF. He didn't like his contract. You figured it out. Now he's world champion. But yeah, too often there have been times when AEW, they'll set something up and then they'll just drop it. Or, it'll be a thing. Oh, hey, we formed this new faction. And then it just sort of dissolves. And at this point, for example, when the Firm formed, it was like, okay, we'll believe it when we see it.
Well, you could see how it was going to dissolve as soon as they announced, like MJF said, yes, this is a faction on retainer.
Right.
I was like, okay, so this is very nebulous.
Yeah, this is not. That's not really a faction.
This is a faction in theory only, essentially, is how you're putting this.
Right. At
which
point
you have Pinnacle, where they were a huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's stories to be told with that faction falling apart. Like an air being let out of a balloon, just fizzled.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hoping, for example, something like the Outsiders storyline and with the women's division, hopefully that builds and builds and builds, like we're talking about. Hey, I think that idea with Jade is great. Builds to a big money match. Yeah. And then you can have, the consequences and repercussions after that. But it's got to build to that big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a crescendo. Absolutely.
Yeah. Speaking of which, number 3. Feature the Elite. Their name is part of the company's name. It's all Elite Wrestling.
You're right. Elite. That is correct.
It's the second word in the name.
Word, yeah.
So, yeah, obviously they were a big, big part of the company during one of my favorite times, and that was simply when Kenny Omega was champion, when he had all the titles. And, there was a time when there was the Super Elite as well. And now, they have a match on I think on Rampage this coming Friday, we've got the Young Bucks versus Aussie Open, which is cool. And it will be a really great match. But it didn't really. Did that? I know they announced it on Dynamite, but there wasn't anything on Dynamite that actually motivated it.
No.
Right. No. You should probably do that. And then for the previous 2 weeks, we got a Rampage match, which was a rematch, and we had 2 basketball segments to sort of set it up. Kenny Omega is one of your most dominant champions ever, and yeah, they're the trios champions, but there's not really a proper trios division, really. So what are they doing with those guys? I still think my conspiracy theory is spot on, but we're not going to get into that right now.
Well, we'll see. There's plenty of trios out there.
Yeah. Remember, it was weird that they didn't have trios titles.
I know.
Because it was man, they have so many trios.
I know. And maybe now that the Elite are feuding with the House of Black, even though it's a 1 week build going into Revolution, there's something there that you could tell a really interesting story if you build and took the time to do it. They just haven't really done it. They know everybody wants to see this match.
Yeah,
super excited to see it.
Yeah.
So this can give us the match with the bare minimum necessary to motivate the match. And that's kind of right now. AEW's primary creative flaw is we'll conjure up enough story to motivate the match.
Yeah.
And if we get more from there, seemingly, cool. But let's just get the competitors in the ring and wrestling, and then that's enough. But yeah, it's weird they're not, especially ever since they came back from their suspension. It's just been, we're here. The best of 7 matches were great. And it offered them an opportunity to show various facets of who they are as performers. There's elements of comedy in some of those matches, and some of them are pretty violent. And, the 3 of them and the Lucha Brothers are all wildly creative in terms of how they put matches together.
It was clear everybody in that feud liked each other and liked working with each other. Like it just seemed like, and that's what I'm sort of concerned that the Elite are just on the Elite Island at this point. I mean, dude, think about this. Like you said, there's been one segment and then like 3 frames, because that's what there was during like one of their things. And it's like, are we going to get like a Kenny versus Malachi match out of this?
I know.
Because that sounds like it'd be kind of awesome.
Buddy match?
Right, because that sounds like it'd be kind of awesome.
I know. You have these singles matches to build the trios.
Right, like match. I feel like there should be singles set. Like if they're going to make the trios titles the thing, then you do the singles matches or like tag variations in advance of that. Unless the idea is let's do the trios match and then we do a series of singles matches, because Kenny versus Malachi should be a big deal. But if this is for the trios titles, the trios title should be the big blow off match.
Yeah, you'd think so. You have the singles matches to build to the championship match.
Yeah. But seemingly we're not getting that. But the bottom line is like there was a time when the Elite were everything. It's funny because when it started out, the Elite were like just sort of letting the others take the spotlight and not themselves. Then they realized, hey, people really like the Elite. It's called All Elite Wrestling. We should probably feature ourselves. And guess what? It was actually really good. And then we're back to them just not even seemingly featuring other people. They're just sort of taking a back seat in general, which is just, I don't know.
It's strange. It is strange.
Yeah. Let's move on to number 2. More time and stories for the women's division. So this latest story with the outsider stuff, I think is a really good, story idea with some so-so execution. But regardless, you are seeing more women featured, and they're given a bit more time. This past Dynamite, we had more of an enhancement match with Sky Blue and Saraya, but there was still a lot going on, and that's appreciated. But I go back, and how many times do we get a match like Jamie Hayter and Hikaru Shida, on the card, which is just a killer barn burner match. Yeah. We need more of that in the main event. We need more of that kind of stuff where you get featured big time matches on a regular basis on Dynamite.
Yeah. And then not just have the one featured match on the card. You can tell more than one story at a time.
It is weird. It is absolutely strange to me that I don't know if it's in reference and or response to the criticism of having only one match a week on Dynamite and one match a week on Rampage, that he doubles down on that and just is insistent on featuring one match. But like, it is weird that there have been no like outlier episodes of Dynamite where there's been like 2 women's matches.
Oh, there's been episodes with 2 matches before.
When was the last time we had one?
It's been a while. Because I remember talking about it on the show. It was like, wow, it'd be really cool if this was the norm.
I used the word outlier incorrectly. There was an outlier, but that just means like a single or very, very, very rare instance where it happens. It's surprising me that we don't get it at least once a month is my point, I
mean, 2 matches minimum should be the norm.
Yeah.
You look at Impact, you look at NXT. How much focus they put on the
sometimes NXT has like, I think there was an episode that had nothing but women's matches. It's like you got to mix this stuff up. And that's one thing that's not really on here, but it could actually be a larger, a more broad issue. You need to sort of space out the divisions better. You mentioned Impact. Impact spends the exact correct amount of time on each division to make each division feel like a deal, like it's getting enough time. And so if that means one week just giving us a small recap package on your world title scene in anticipation of something big happening next week, then you can devote that time to more trios, more women's, more tag, the TNT title. Instead, it seems to be like the same kind of formula every week, and it just doesn't really work all that great.
I mean, you're going to have your 10-minute MJF talking bit, and MJF's a great talker, but if he's not advancing the story in his segment, then while technically he's a good talker, you're not achieving much from a storytelling perspective.
Yeah, right.
Have him go out there and insult the audience, insult his competitor. If that's all there is to it, well, you're not advancing the story. I mean, it took us Christopher Daniels in his promo 2 weeks ago or a week ago did more to advance the story between MJF and Danielson than I think to that point any MJF promo had.
Yeah.
MJF's promo this week on Dynamite, I thought, did a much better job of making the feud way more personal, about more than just a title or who's better. Yeah. But prior to that, it was Daniel's promo, and so you're like, okay, MJF had some promos before that. It didn't really advance a whole lot.
Yeah. And I mean, you have enough different things on your show that can draw ratings. Like I was looking at the breakdown of the quarter hours, and, a combination of, I think it was like the Acclaimed, like around the Acclaimed segment, the Acclaimed match is when the rating peaked. And so you have different things on your show that you can use. You don't need, and if you really want the live crowd who paid their money to go there to see MJF, you can do that in a dark segment. That's what WWE, they'll do their show and then they'll give you like a killer dark match afterwards for the crowd to go home happy. And AEW could easily do the same thing. I know they got Rampage afterwards. You could fit that in between. But yeah, I think a better job needs to be done allotting time in general. Pull some time away from other stuff and give some time to some other stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know if you'd want to get rid of an Acclaimed match, but given that the Acclaimed were going to be facing off with one of the teams that wins the Battle Royal, you could have done something with the Acclaimed during the Battle Royal, maybe put them on commentary, have them get into a brawl with the Guns or whatever. They could still do their shtick in a promo. You don't need them for a full match. You could devote that match to something else as opposed to them fighting a foregone conclusion match against the Firm guys. But no, allotment of time needs to be fixed. But basically, but to include more, the women's programming. I think that whenever they're on TV, it's, people like that stuff. Anyways, let's move on to number one. Hire a showrunner for both AEW and Ring of Honor separately, by the way. Two showrunners.
Two showrunners.
One for
Call
each.
Freddie Prinze Jr.
That's good. Yeah. Jimmy Jacobs, maybe.
Jimmy Jacobs.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Jimmy Jacobs. Yeah. There you go. That's a good Ring of Honor name. So dude, look, to his credit, Tony Khan does a lot of things.
Yes.
Like he runs analytics for a National Football League team. He does the same job for Fulham, or he manages Fulham FC. And on top of that, he runs AEW and does weekly creative for all their shows.
And he runs Ring of Honor, is going to soon be doing creative for all their shows.
Right. That's too much.
That's 4 full-time jobs.
That is way too much. And I honestly think that AEW, you gotta release some of that. And I know he probably has a blast doing it. He probably enjoys the shit out of all those jobs, which is a great problem to have.
Yeah, it is.
But it's kind of a problem because AEW's creative is suffering because of it. And there's a number of people out there that I feel could totally do it. And if he gives Scott D'Amore, I don't know, $400 million to say, come on in, and that's a bit excessive, probably. But, pay him a pretty penny to pry him away from Impact.
Yeah.
To run AEW. My God, I would love to see what that would look like. I think it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I you got names like Scott D'Amore, who's obviously with Impact. Imagine if after this Bloodline story runs its course, if somehow Tony Khan could hire Paul Heyman.
God, I thought you were gonna say Paul Levesque. Yeah, that'd be nuts. That'd be absolutely nuts.
It's probably never gonna happen. But you never know.
Or I heard Michael Hayes is heavily involved in the Bloodline stuff too. But no, dude, I think you're right. I think there's any number of names out there. Former WWE names. writers, whatever, that, they're young, they got a good mind for the business. Bring them in. Tony Khan can paint the broad strokes, and then get these younger dudes to initiate it and to execute it, and to book a show with, that feels full and complete and urgent and all and dramatic and all the stuff that we want in our wrestling.
Yeah. Motivate matches that book stories that do more than just motivate matches.
I mean, Vince Russo.
No.
Well, I just shivered down my spine there.
No.
Conan. Probably not either, huh? He can stick with AAA. Oh, man. So anyways, hire a showrunner. It's our number one suggestion. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, if you hire a showrunner and that showrunner does their job well, a lot of these other issues would probably be taken care of.
Right, exactly. Because, Steven Larson. I don't know if I'd want to do that.
I don't know how to do that. We have to bring Cody back to teach us how to
I know. Hey, Cody
TV.
Rhodes. I hear his contract's coming up in about 4 years. Anyways, so that's going to do it for the show today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Next week, we're finally going to bring you worst WrestleMania main event builds.
Well, next week is Revolution, so we'll have the recap of that up on Saturday. So it'll be the week after that. The
week after that, because then we're going in Raw. Then we're on the road to WrestleMania. Right now, we're on the road to Revolution, but then we'll be on the road to WrestleMania. Then we'll give you the worst WrestleMania main event builds. We've already got a list. I'm gonna have some fun doing some research on this one.
Same.
Yeah. But anyways, let us know in the comments below what you'd like to see fixed in AEW. How do you think you can improve the product? If you want to drop your resume in terms of being a showrunner for AEW, drop that in the comments, and then we'll forward it on to Tony Khan.
Somehow, some way. We'll make it happen.
We'll figure it out. Anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. Appreciate it. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.